You know, I don't even have the fan turned all the way up.
It's still cold in here.
It's really not cold. It's a little warm, actually. So
Well, you've been in here for a while, but I mean, I have on extra layers today because I'm cold.
you're also on blood thinners,
That's
so
true.
I don't know how valid your opinion is on the temperature. So, hey guys, Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time we had The Stones of Blood. What was that one about?
I've totally forgotten.
Right. So, the Doctor and Romana land back on Earth, and they find a Stonehenge.
That's right.
Not
That's
the
right.
Stonehenge, but a Stonehenge. And
And by the way, I'm sure most of our British viewers know this. The word henge is not like a hinge, H-I-N-G, but it literally means hanging. So Stonehenge literally means the hanging stones.
yeah. So yeah, there's this whole thing where the stones can come to life, and there's this ancient druid goddess or something that is going to use their power. Then the episode kind of takes a turn. They go to hyperspace on this spaceship, and they find these two justice machines, little sparkly things that administer the law. And the Doctor is put on trial until the Doctor eventually finds a way to put the druid goddess on trial. And then at the end, he was still slated to be executed, but he just sent them like 4,000 years in the future to get a head start. So it was odd,
Yes,
to say the
This
least.
is one of the reasons why I don't remember it.
Yeah.
Now, I like the Stonehenge part and the old professor, the lady, and then it turns out her young assistant is the druid goddess.
Yeah.
But the whole switch over to the future in the spaceship with the justice machines was kind of weird.
Yeah. It seemed like just a different episode altogether.
Yeah.
That they kind of had an idea for something, like, these justice machines, and you put the Doctor on trial, even though we've kind of done that before. Well, I mean, I guess we haven't had the Doctor on trial himself, I think. There's been a lot of episodes.
Wasn't Hartnell put on trial once, and Ian was forced to defend him, or or the Doctor was on trial, and Ian?
Yeah, it was...
Ian was trial anyway.
Yeah, Ian was on trial, and then the Doctor decided to defend him. I don't remember what happened, though, in that one. But
4 years ago.
That was the Keys of Marinus, which was the exact same, basically, as this overarching story of finding the different keys. So, of which, in the last episode, the key was the necklace that the druid goddess had.
And again, absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the story.
No.
And only at the very end did the Doctor snatch it away and went, "Oh, this must be it." And it's like, what? Some clue. If you're going to do a story arc over an entire season, called the keys or key to time, you need to have some kind of setup for that. And it's not going, I think, as well as the producers might have thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just it's a season of episodes that have been doctored vaguely to have a revolving plot. But that's about it. Other than that, there really isn't much else. Because they also mentioned that... Because there's a point where Romana is pushed off a cliff, seemingly by the Doctor. And they say that, oh, well, because the keys can transform into anything, this person is utilizing their key to shapeshift. That's never brought up again. They never show that again. The only thing I can assume that is supposed to go into is the fact that the druid goddess had a disguise as just a human scientist. But other than that, which you could have just said they have a disguise. I would believe that, So, I don't know. It's a very strange overarching story for this season. But yeah, today we are on
The Androids of Tara.
Yes. Apparently my eyes are getting worse because I can't. It's getting a little harder to read that as time goes on. So yeah.
And I speculated this would either take place in Ireland, which is where Tara originally was, or, on the set of Gone with the Wind, because that's what the plantation was called.
Yes. And I think I speculated that it would be either of those, but in space. So.
Gone with the Wind in space. In space there is no wind.
You know what? That sounds like a movie that Ed Wood have made back in the day. So, but yeah, the androids of Tara. I mean, we've had androids before. There was the android invasion. I can't for the life of me remember what that episode was about, but I think there were androids in it.
Yeah. That was where they took over this little town, wasn't it? And
they were like it was all the unit guys, but they weren't the unit guys. Yeah. Like that. Or they had like a fake town that the Doctor and Sarah Jane went to. Yeah. And it was filled with androids disguised as the unit boys. Yeah. So maybe there will be a follow-up to that, although I don't think we're getting the unit boys back again. Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. You got anything else?
No. I got nothing.
Then why don't we go ahead and jump right into this episode of Doctor Who. Here we go. I swear that was the author last episode.
Now here's a question. The part of the central console that goes up and down, you suppose there's somebody under there pushing it up, or do they actually have that automated?
I think it's automated.
Well, it certainly looks like Ireland, but I suspect it isn't.
Was that smooth enough for you, Doctor? I said, was that smooth enough?
Mate in 11. Oh, what? Have we arrived? Oh, good. Where?
Tara.
Tara.
Earth-type gravity, oxygen atmosphere, climate, temperature.
Oh, the planet is Tara.
Tara. Tahiti?
It's a magical place.
Goody. Gosh. That takes me back.
Fishing pole.
Forward. That's the trouble with time travel, you can never remember.
What is it?
Last time I used this, I was with Isaac Walton.
Author of The Complete Angler.
Well, what about the fourth segment?
You get it.
Right, I will.
Yes, you do that. It's a lovely day, beautiful countryside. The walk will do you good.
Thank you.
Yeah, would you just mind standing aside, please? You're casting a shadow. It frightens the fish.
Frightens the fish. Look, I'm going to get that fourth segment, and I'll be back here in under an hour. You be ready to leave.
Yes.
Yeah, I tried fishing once. Boring as sin.
Of course, sin isn't exactly boring.
Touché.
Don't know if there are any Sasquatch-type creatures in the lore of the southeastern states, like Georgia, which is where Tara would have been located, in Gone with the Wind. Well, that was easy.
That's why the Doctor took the day off. Oh gosh.
Not exactly a Bigfoot, but...
Well... It's like an Ewok took a real big hit of cocaine.
My steward can register your stone while my surgeon attends to your injury.
Look, it's very kind of you, but I really can't...
Then I shall provide you with a mount and an escort to take you wherever you wish.
It's just a question of time.
An hour, no more. What's an hour out of your life? I shall not take no for an answer.
Very much in the mold of the Master, wouldn't you say?
Well, you know, Leela would have killed him for taking that stone. And probably killed the beast. Brought it home, cooked it, and ate it. Ow.
You've got a horse. He's got coconuts. Coconuts are not indigenous to Europe. Well, they could have been brought here by a swallow.
It's the ancient home of the Grendels of Gra.
Grendel, of course, and the characters in
Quite
Beowulf.
escaped
Oh, yeah.
like that.
true knight would have taken off his helmet by this time. It's Quasimodo. Well, it's a semi-historical anyway. By the way, I love those comments about how the costumes for that one episode where it all looked Russian, that BBC had just done a production of Anna Karenina. Ah, there he goes. Hats off. And
Thank
now, on the
You
diagnostic
won't forget to
bed.
register my stone, will you?
What?
My stone.
Oh, no. No, of course not, my dear.
I guess these people are just very aesthetic.
I got your message.
Disassemble her.
We can
No,
cannibalize the
disassemble
parts.
Johnny Five.
What parts? Now, wait a minute.
I should like to keep the head, you're right. It really is quite remarkable.
That's a kitchen carving knife.
If you don't stop burning my scarf, you're going to have to kill me.
On how we treat him.
Oh, they finally shortened his scarf.
Your Highness.
Alrighty. That's part one.
Very interesting.
Well, yeah.
Now, again, it's not anywhere really historical, but I love the costuming. The fact that it does seem to be set in a somewhat, don't want to say medieval, but feudal society. But there is some obvious difference here because the peasants, instead of just being what Shakespeare would call the rude mechanicals, the butcher and the baker and the carpenters and things like that, they appear to be the only ones who have any knowledge of android technology and medicine and things like that. So that's kind of weird, but again, it's kind of intriguing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, again, it's a good thing that Leela's not here because those peasants would rise up and, I mean, the aristocracy, they don't have any skills. What can they do?
Yeah.
So, except, I mean, I guess they are at least decent with an electric sword, but that's about it. So yeah, it's interesting. It definitely reminds me of the first story we had, which was the Rybos operation, which sort of had that, vaguely, Russian or sort of Eastern European vibe, but it was also still, space, and, here's, this disgraced emperor or something coming in. So that's kind of interesting. And honestly, if you're going to do that, that's a good idea, Yeah. I do like that. And it does sort of remind me of the, because I brought this up before, like the original series, Star Trek, where it's like, oh, well, we've found a planet that seems to be exactly like 20th century Earth, because those were the costumes we could borrow from the next door studio.
Yeah.
Except that the next door studio at the BBC clearly is filming some other historical thing. Yeah. So,
but again, love the location. I love that scene by the little brook or stream or river, whatever that was. I may have told you this before. Our house in France had a stream that ran through the back part of the property. We didn't have anything really close when we lived in East Anglia. Don't remember doing any fishing over there, but we used to go fishing. Little town in eastern France called Gey-sur-Argent. If you want to look it up, it's just outside of Chaumont. Lived there for 3 years back in the 50s.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting start. So, and I'll be curious if this is, maybe this ends with the androids rising up and getting rid of them. They're the androids. They're the aristocracy, but they have the skills that the peasants have. Yeah. So,
and we do have to say this time around, the stone, the key of time, is right there in the very beginning. Yeah. Except that it has been taken by Count Grendel Now we have to figure out how to get it back.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense that, the key, the fragment of the key wouldn't be throughout the entire story. So, like, I get why they kind of did it like this, but in making this story, it always seems to just be sort of disjointed,
Yeah.
Like, you would almost expect that, well, first off, we're 4 stories in, we've still yet to see the Black Guardian.
Yeah.
So I'm still banking on the White Guardian is actually the Black Guardian, or there just is no difference of Guardians. It's just somebody who hired the Doctor and Romana and is going to trick them at some point. Because other than that, like, you'd have to have the story where it's like multiple people are like vying for the key and they know what the key is, and so you're kind of doing that, like, which honestly was kind of like the keys of Marinus. But that one was also a bit sort of disjointed in its plot, but it was just one episode, so it kind of worked out.
And I have to say, the effect with the electric sword is kind of interesting. And again, certainly no offense meant to the special effects department at the BBC. I probably expect it's inspired by the lightsabers of Star Wars, which came out roughly at this time. But again, although it's inspired by it, it's completely different.
Yeah, so it definitely seems like it probably was something that, as George Lucas was designing it, that was probably just one thing. It's like, oh, just a sword with some electricity, and you go to different things. So now it's like, okay, well, you see lightsabers, or, what little lightsabers they had in the original movie, and you kind of do something vaguely similar, but it is still different. We have yet to see what happens when you clash 2 of those electric swords together. So,
and I'm wondering if it can be short-circuited by water.
Yeah, maybe. And this is the tail end of 1978 now. So yeah, Star Wars would be out by this time.
Yeah.
So, alrighty.
Or maybe the lightsabers, if this came out first, were inspired by this.
Well, so.
But love the fact that they burned the Doctor's hat and his scarf.
Yeah, well, that's just a heck of a way to wake up. It's just this tiny explosion next to your face, So, and I can't tell, did he actually burn just a complete, like, cut basically through the scarf and it's now shorter?
I thought he did, because I thought Tom Baker at one point threw the extra piece onto the table.
Yeah, so they finally decided they have to shorten that scarf a little bit.
By the way, when Mom and I were out in the shed looking for costumes for the show that I'm currently directing, I found my Doctor Who scarf. Now, mine is only 2 colors. It's kind of a beige and a dark brown. But again, it's about 12 feet long. And I had misplaced it for many years, but did see it, so maybe I'll bring it out and show it to everybody sometime.
Man, I can't even wear like a regular scarf. I don't know how you wear 12 feet, and Tom Baker's running around it and doing all this stuff too. Yeah. So
you'll be with the android at all times.
Now look here, Zanuck, I've got better things to do than meddle in the politics of your piffling little planet. On the other hand, I could be with the android at all times.
I feel like we've seen Zadok before in another story.
It's incredible.
Yes, the resemblance is extraordinary, isn't it?
Is it an android?
Good heavens, no, my dear, that's the Princess Strella, First Lady of Tara, a descendant of the royal house, mistress of the domains of Thorvald, Montgard, and Freya. In fact, Tara's most eligible spinster, shortly to become, in rapid succession, my fiancée, my bride, and then deceased. Yes.
The Princess
Only a
Bride.
tragic accident.
Strella? No, I'm not Strella. I just look like her. My name's Ramona.
For some reason.
See, my dear Reinhard.
Gotta be hard to walk through the forest with a big spike on your head.
If they have a shot of him crossing the water, that'll be like the Dalek coming out of the Thames. Wonder what production those were from. 24-hour clock.
Your Majesty, the speech accession. You must say it.
Very subtle.
My subjects.
I, Princess Strella, descendant of the royal kings of Tara, mistress of the domains of Thorvald, Mortgard, and Freya, do humbly offer my loyalty to the king, and do hereby recognize his suzerainty over me and all whom I command.
No!
All right. Well, something happened to him. So, you know, the guy, I can't remember. Oh, Grendel, that was his name.
Grendel of Grok.
I keep trying to think of like who he looks like, and the only thing I'm vaguely getting is Ted Cruz with a big nose, and that's all I'm getting. But
No, there's another, again, very famous character actor.
yeah, so, and of course he probably just looks familiar because they all look familiar because they all look like they should be in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So there's also that side to it as well.
Oh, I want to say it's a Spanish actor. I can see his face, but I can't think of his name at the moment. I'll come up with it at some point.
Yeah, so. Well, I mean, everything seemed to be going well. I don't understand why the Doctor has done this.
Well, somehow or other, methinks that the Strella was actually an android.
Yeah, I guess it could be that.
I don't think he would hit Romana.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, he was, somehow trying to break whatever, drug or potion that she was under. But we didn't actually see him hit her, so.
Well, or maybe, unless it was a thing of Grendel was going to stab her or something. Because he did kind of walk behind her before the Doctor went over and did that. So, it could be something like that, so. Now, okay, you said that clock was a 24-hour clock.
Yes, but it seemed to then be divided into, sections of 4. The Roman numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, that repeated themselves 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, so... And now, I guess I don't know 24-hour clocks. Do they only have one hand? I would assume they would have a second one.
Not necessarily, because on a 24-hour clock, it would be very difficult to distinguish 60 minutes, because you'd have such a small area in between.
Yeah, so...
And really only military people use 24-hour clocks. Or, for example, your mom has her father's 24-hour pocket watch that he used to use when he was working for the railroads, because they would often run on 24-hour time so that they would know, when a train was due in western Oklahoma and then had to go on to Amarillo, then Albuquerque, and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I think the British do, to an extent, use 24-hour time. Because I've seen some episodes where, someone's they slept in too late, and it shows, their clock, and it's it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and then there's a transition. It shows it's it's 14 in the afternoon, and it's so I would almost wonder if maybe 24-hour and I guess 12-hour time. I almost wonder if that's sort of like how the British seem to also use kilometers and miles, because I see that a lot too.
I don't know about that. In the unit, people would have used 24-hour because they're military or paramilitary, however extra military.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, government officials would tend to do that.
Yeah. So I don't know. Let us know down in the comments what version of time do you use. So, but yeah. Either way, it was an interesting clock, and I'm not sure because every time it would cut to the clock and it would just move, and then it would just sort of pan down. So I'm assuming that's just supposed to be, an hour has passed or so.
Yeah.
So.
Do humbly offer my loyalty to the king, and do hereby recognize his suzerainty over me and all whom I command.
What does that mean, suzerainty?
Sovereignty, basically.
No!
Are you mad?
Seize him! He's killed the princess!
Stop! That's not the princess.
Oh, it was an android. Alright.
I shall leave my own personal guard here to protect His Majesty.
I'm afraid I cannot permit that, Count.
It is not for you to say.
As commander of His Majesty's bodyguard, it is my decision and mine alone.
You presume too much, Zadok.
What if everyone on this planet is an android?
The actor I'm thinking of played
Will you be all right tomorrow?
Manolito on a Western TV series called The High Chaparral, late 60s, early 70s. I want to say his name was Henry something. Henry Darrow.
Lamia, prepare another android and...
Monastic lands are held by the religious orders under the protection of the crown. Those lands and that protection may be withdrawn at my discretion at any time.
That's
Good.
like King John.
I propose to be discreet for the night.
Doctor, the king seems to be, how shall I say, a trifle more...
What, intelligent than the real one?
Yes.
Well, of course he is. I programmed him.
We don't want him too intelligent, Doctor. You can't trust androids, you know.
It's funny, you know. That's what some androids say about people.
What?
Anyway, how can you possibly be frightened of something that goes...
He can be trusted, can't he, sir?
I wish we knew more about him.
There's only one way
That's
to
what
say
everybody
this.
says.
Do not activate your sword.
Good dog. Good dog.
Stormtroopers.
Caution, Master.
What is it, K9?
Kill him.
Somehow they found something clumsier than K9.
The Count's just offered me the throne.
That's treason, Count.
Only so long as the king is alive.
Seize him!
Seriously, the old man got away?
Huh, yeah.
Why did you do that?
Because he's got Romana, look!
Stop. Let me go. Doctor. Doctor, help me.
Well, this is certainly the most interesting of the Keys of Time so far.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting if they just pull out the spear and it's like, oh, you missed all of his vital circuits. So, but I get the feeling that's not the case.
Yeah.
I do like, though, that just seeing that they obviously switched to, a mannequin that looks a lot like the guy who plays the android king. I love then just having him at full strength and just lob that spear into him. Because that is sort of a problem, is that, well, you come in under the flag of truce, unarmed, but it's on a spear.
Yeah.
I don't think that really counts as being unarmed, so... And obviously he probably doesn't want to give the throne to the Doctor, but I'm unsure, like, what he hopes to gain from that. I mean, I guess it's the whole thing of, well, if you're no longer useful to Zedak, but I don't know. You would think that he would still trust the Doctor to help enough.
But then if the Doctor were to die suddenly, then once again the Council or whoever would have to re-elect a new one, and he would still be first in line.
I mean, it would be hilarious if the who was the guy, the I don't remember what his title was, but the Pope of this world.
What do you call him? The Arch... I'm sure it's in the...
Maybe, yeah.
Archimandrite.
Yeah. So...
Archimandrite.
I mean, it would be interesting because he implied that there are other nobles. It's just that I assume Count Grendel would be the highest noble.
Yeah.
It would be interesting if he just sidestepped all of it and just went to a different, non-problematic noble, you know? So, of course, that's the other thing, too, is that if... I don't know, I guess it's not that strange of a succession. Because, I meguess it's similar to the presidential succession that we have, is that it would go to president, vice president, and then
Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House specifically. So I guess it would be something like that, is that if you run out of the specific royal family, you would then go to the count, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
Now, theoretically speaking, the real princess, Strella, is still alive, and theoretically, she could become the new monarch.
Yeah, so...
But again, it's fascinating. Fisher, is it Peter Fisher, whoever wrote this?
David Fisher, I think.
Yeah. Well done. I mean, really enjoying this script a lot.
And it's interesting, because I swear he wrote the last episode, too. So I don't know. Maybe he wrote this one, and then it was like, we need somebody to fill in for episode 3, and so we just wrote that real quick with some leftover scraps. We've got Stonehenge, we've got a spaceship set. Figure something out.
Now, again, some of these costumes are, I'm going to say, I don't know that they're from Anna Karenina. Karenina. I can't remember how that's pronounced. Anyway, but they do, some of them look vaguely Eastern European, Russian, Cossack, sort of that same thing that we saw before in Rebus Operation.
Yeah.
Who is to be married? And to whom?
The king to the Princess Strella.
The king?
Yeah, he has placed himself under my protection, Your Eminence. Sadly, I have to tell you, he is sick. In fact, he is very near to death. And after the funeral rite, there will be a second wedding for you to perform.
A second wedding? May I ask whose that will be?
My own. I shall be marrying the poor king's widow.
If someone on the inside opens the main gate and a group of our men under cover of darkness, take the guard by surprise.
That's hardly ethical.
Have you ever known Grendel abide by the rules of war? But who's going to open the gates?
He literally just didn't do that.
Be careful. Shh. Both kneel.
Remember the princess.
Because that doesn't sound suspicious at all.
Well, I've no wish to kill a man without a weapon in his hand. Here. Help!
Doctor, he's the best swordsman on Tara.
See?
Do you know what you're doing?
Well, the last one did.
I shall give you a
Theoretically.
fencing lesson before you die.
They only spark when they touch flesh or something non-metal.
I guess. So did the composer die or something? What? Where's the music?
Yeah.
I'd like to take back everything I said about the Doctor versus the Master. Although it's really just down to no music.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Because otherwise, it's not terrible.
This is one of those Princess Bride moments. I forgot to tell you I'm a master swordsman.
Well,
He's done it! Come on!
alright. Now it's better.
Small group.
Well, yeah. Oh. I was really hoping that would just keep going back and forth.
Well, that's a very long story.
Meanwhile,
Next time, I shall not be so lenient.
but like a bean burrito, he shall return.
K9? K9!
All right then. That was that.
That would have been interesting if K9 had caught, what's his name? Grendel.
Yeah. All right then. That's the androids of Tara. So I was wrong. They weren't all androids all along. But, of course, they never did say... Romana clearly knew how to help the king with his injury. And I guess they just did that on the way out.
Yeah.
Must have been.
And again, how was he injured?
I guess it was just... He got hit... They must have just hit him with a sword. Yeah. And then that must have just gotten infected or something. So... But I don't know. He seemed pretty lively once he got back up. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's just a flesh wound. So...
It is but a flesh wound. No, it's not. I've cut your arm off. No, you haven't. Anyway.
Anyhow.
Thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's got the swashbuckling. It's got all of the, obviously medieval courtier inside treachery and yada, yada, yada. And the androids didn't really detract from it. They could have very easily done the whole Mark Twain Prince and Pauper thing where they had, or even, was it The Man in the Iron Mask? I can't remember, where there's they found a double who is a peasant, and they put him in, or they intend to put him in as the king. So, and I mean, I understand that at this point, the British public wanted more, alien and robot stories and things like that. But again, it would have been just as easy a fix to have just substitutes for both Strella and the king, or the Reinert, whatever they called him.
Yeah.
So, but again, totally enjoyable because the androids were such a small part of it that it didn't really matter.
Yeah. So it's just a weird, it's not historical, but it's just got a very historical aesthetic to it. Yeah. So, which, I mean, if they want to keep doing those, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting. But yeah, so we started off with the doctor trying to take a day off. Obviously, didn't go to plan. So, and again, even though Romana found the fragment, so early, it didn't really go anywhere. Again, it's like they point out, it's like, oh, this is a weird thing you have. Okay. All right, let's move on.
Well, other than and what was the Taran doctor's name?
Lamia.
Lamia knew that there was something special about it because she had broken 2 of her diamond or carbide, drills on it or something. So that could have figured in, but it's just as well that it didn't. Unless she had said, perhaps this will be a power source for the androids or whatever. Just some reason for her to keep it other than it belonged to Romana and she figured that it was probably valuable but didn't know why.
Yeah, so now it would have also just been interesting because the whole thing started with Grendel coming in. They never brought the beast back again. That little Ewok looking dude. I just suddenly remembered that, oh yeah, that was a thing. That
Ewok
was
on steroids.
Yeah, we kept going back and forth across the countryside, and those things never came back. Yeah. So, but the whole thing started with, oh well, yes, I'll give you your stone back as soon as I register it and stuff. And obviously that seemed to just be a ploy to get her because he obviously recognized that she looks exactly like Princess Strella for some reason. Yeah. But it would have just been interesting if it literally just was that, if it was just got it registered and you go back to the TARDIS. Obviously, there's no episode there if you do that, But I don't know. Or if you did that, you got the fragment, you head off, and then there's some sort of strange thing that happens because you went and got that. I don't know. But I mean, either way, it still works. Now, the whole thing with Princess Strella, I mean, this definitely just reminds me of, what was the episode where there was the like priest or the abbe or something, and he looked like the doctor.
Exactly like Hartnell, yeah.
Yeah, and they just had Hartnell playing him, but there was just no explanation. There just was a person that looks like him. So,
well, all the time, and I've even seen it in some of the comments here, that people seem to think that I look like George Lucas.
Well, yeah.
I don't see it. I mean, I can kind of understand it, but, so everybody has doppelgangers somewhere in the world, so I'm assuming somewhere in the galaxy or in the universe, everybody has a double somewhere.
Yeah. And wasn't there... Oh, yeah, and then I guess Salamander with the second Doctor. I guess that was the other big one. So, yeah, I guess that does... I guess that just does happen. And there is... See, the thing is, I know that there is an explanation much later on, because Doctor Who loves just doing something, and then like 40 years later, they'll explain it. But, because there's an episode with the 10th Doctor where he goes back to Pompeii, and he meets someone who's played by Peter Capaldi. And at the time, it was just, it's Peter Capaldi's just playing this character. And then years later, they cast Peter Capaldi as the Doctor, and they did actually go through and they wrote a reason as to why he has that face. Specifically, it's like, this face, it's a reminder that I need to, I need to save everybody or do everything I can to save everybody. So they wrote in that reason, and I guess that's sort of retconning, like, anytime there's been a previous, doppelganger, it's like, that there's some cosmic reason as to why the Doctor has the face that they do. Doesn't make any sense for the first Doctor, because that's the face he was born with. Kind of. Yeah. Unless you go with the other retcons later, but that's beside the point.
And again, I've mentioned this before. Tom Baker looks a whole lot like the Welsh singer Tom Jones. And I'm really surprised that at no point during Tom Baker's time period did they not get Tom Jones to come in and do, if just nothing else, a cameo. I mean, from a distance, put him in the hat, put him in the scarf and the coat and everything, and just have him walk by, and the Doctor look at him and go, what? And then he breaks into song or something. I don't know. Well, yeah. But there's too many wonderful things that you could do with that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah. So, but yeah. So I guess that's just the whole thing with Strella and Romana. And again, that's another thing though, where it's like, well, if it's specifically like, well, once you regenerate, you get this face, and it could be a face that you've seen before, or this or that, or some weird cosmic, whatever stupid reason that they have to, use the same actor twice. But it also still doesn't make sense again for Romana, because I'm assuming she hasn't regenerated yet. Yeah. So, but I don't know. It's also just a thing of they just wanted to use the actor, shut up, who cares? So I will, and we move on. That's just kind of where we are with a lot of, after 100 episodes, 101 episodes that we're on now, I've just had to, like, accept, it's like, they just do a thing, and then you move on with your life. So, but yeah. And it's also just interesting, because the whole thing with, the knights, there's swords that are electrified. What can I think of? Crossbow. The crossbows that fire, electric bolts. And the androids are so not a part of this story that it almost makes you wonder if they made this story, maybe they just wrote a historical, and then, maybe in first draft they were like, hey, you can't just have it be a historical and nothing else. You have to have something in there, and maybe putting that in, because other than the androids, there was like almost no futuristic technology or anything, So, like, aside from that, it was like the clock was like the only mechanical thing they had. So
yeah, they're still riding horses. They still live in castles. All of the stuff was medieval except for their weaponry.
Yeah.
hardly makes sense.
Yeah,
and the androids.
And there's one room that has a classic 70s looking computer to help build these androids, but other than that, nothing.
And very odd too that it's the lower classes, the peasants, who can do the tech, and the upper classes can't do it. Now, again, that's kind of like pretty much every major European revolution, where the lower classes are the tradesmen, but again, they're the carpenters, they're the bakers, they're the wheelwrights and coopers and cobblers and things like that. Whereas the upper class really don't do anything. But to have the peasants who are subjugated and yet have control of such powerful technology is kind of a little glitch in the whole overall scheme. But again, still enjoyed the entire episode because it was, again, had the feel of the 40s and 50s swashbuckler epics, mistaken identity and all this sort of other stuff. So thoroughly enjoyed it, and we're just nitpicking because that's what they pay us the big bucks for.
Yeah. And speaking of nitpicking, they had that moment where the Doctor made the android Reinhardt too smart, and they said about that, like, well, we can't have him be too smart for when he goes into this meeting and stuff, and there was he said something, and the Doctor said, oh, that's what androids say about people sometimes, and they never went anywhere with that. Like, I was wondering if, like, are we gonna get like android rights, like, while we have all this squabbling amongst all the nobility, it's like, well, maybe the androids will take over and there will be a time of peace or something, and then that just didn't happen. He just got a spear through his chest, and that was that. So I don't know, it's just a very strange. Yeah, you're right that it's the androids are such a minor part of this episode, but it almost makes me stop and think, well, why were they there at all then? So
yeah,
but I don't know, unless it was just you can't just do a historical, you have to do something. So,
and again, I didn't mind that it was historical on another planet.
Yeah.
That worked because that was simply their society. And again, if you took all of the technology out of that and simply made it a Prince and the Pauper kind of story, it would have worked just as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is like, because when we say historicals, every time we bring up the historicals, people will always say, well, the historicals didn't play well with audiences. And that's fine. We don't care, but that's fine. We'd still like you to do it anyway. But we also acknowledge that you can do a historical and aliens at the same time. The original Santaran story was that.
That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, Mask of the Mandragora was that as well. And it's like, and so you can do that, but also having this sort of historical aspect, or this, which I guess would be the other side, but still very similar, which is, yes, it's very historical with, the costumes and the setting and everything, but we put it in space. They're, they are aliens, and we do have this sort of android thing going on. And it's like, that's fine. Do that. We don't have to always go to ridiculous, crazy looking planets and sets with the mechanical pirate guy. Or if you're going to make... see, that's the other thing about the pirate planet from 2 stories ago, is that we kind of expected, well, if you're going to do that, they should be the, sort of yar swashbuckling pirates, but they are just in space. Because that'd be a funny contrast to it. Or even like last episode to an extent, where it's like, well, this is a funny contrast of being on this spaceship with these, machines of justice, and also a druid goddess. And it's like, well, that's weird. It didn't quite gel as well as I think they wanted it to, but it was something.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see. I'll still be curious, and people can comment if we have seen Zadok anywhere else, because just his voice kind of sounded familiar, and I could see him as sort of a maybe he kind of reminds me of the Castellan in The Deadly Assassin that the Doctor was working with in that episode. So I'll be curious. I don't know, because he did definitely seem familiar.
And I'll see if I can scrounge up a picture, and I'm pretty sure it's Henry Darrow. I'll see if I can scrounge up a picture of him, especially one if he's got a mustache and maybe the little beard, because he does look a lot like the guy there.
Yeah. So it's also just an interesting choice of name for Count Grendel. I don't know. It's like if you make a reference, I kind of expect more to that, but it was just sort of it's just his name. So, and fair enough.
I many years ago wrote a children's theater adaptation of The Sword and the Stone, the story of young King Arthur, and there was a dragon in it that, for want of because this was way before anybody got interested in bringing dragons back, I named the character Grendel because that was the only dragon name that I could even think of, and this was like early '80s when I was doing this. So
yeah, so is before they brought everything back with Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon and so and
How to Train Your Dragon and
and probably Lord of the Rings. I don't know. I've never seen Lord of the Rings.
There's also a really, and I know a lot of people have probably never seen it or even heard of it, but there was a wonderful movie, if I recall correctly, called Dragonheart, where Sean Connery was the dragon, and he had made a deal with this young highwayman type person that the dragon would go in and terrorize a town, and then the young man would come along and it looked like slay the dragon, and of course the town would give him all the wealth and everything, and then he'd go out of town, and it turns out he and the dragon were in cahoots. So I mean, it was a nice little fun story that again took a twist very similar like this one did.
Yeah,
but again, Sean Connery as the dragon was just wonderful.
Yeah. So, let's see what else was there. We also had the other doctor, the android doctor, Lamia, who was interesting, with her various squiggles on her face. It must have been that it was, maybe they were supposed to pass it off as her hair, but when I saw that, at first I was thinking of like, what was it, the Trill in Deep Space Nine? It's like, oh, maybe she's like a different alien. But she wasn't. She was. But
they knew about aliens because she said she could figure out that the reason they were having trouble with Romana is they said she wasn't a Tauran.
Yeah, I mean, for a episode on another planet, but it's it's so distinct. They never mentioned going out into space or anything like that, and it wasn't like the Ribos operation where you had what was it, Binro the heretic, who was like, I think those are actually suns up there like our own instead of ice crystals or whatever the old-timey consensus of stars were. So like there just wasn't any mention of that for this, which again makes me think somebody wrote a historical and then in the second draft added in more androids. Although I can't see how you write this story originally without the androids, because as little a part they played, they did still play some part, So I'm not sure. We had the whole thing of the double marriage, which what was the Pope's name? Archimandrite? Archimandrite, yeah.
Although at one point he called him Archimandrite.
Yeah. So, maybe the subtitles were wrong, and it's like Archie-Man-Drite, and that's his full legal name. I don't know. So, but he didn't find that suspicious in the least, that it was like, oh yes, the king is very close to death, so he wants to marry the princess, and then once he's dead, I'll marry the princess. And it's like, well, you seem like a trustworthy guy, so yeah. Well, I was kind of actually waiting for some twist that he was going to go against Count Grendel, and it's just the one thing like he didn't account for. He didn't account for the Archimandrite to do something. I don't know what.
But again, that's very similar to medieval politics, because the church and many of the leaders of the principalities and kingdoms and stuff were in league with each other.
Yeah. So, and then we had the world's quietest sword fight. And I really don't know why, because otherwise it was a pretty decent sword fight. Yeah. Like I actually, once you get into the choreography, it's like, well, this isn't bad, and it's probably the best fight that Tom Baker's had in 5 seasons, I think we're on now, with him. So it's like, so it wasn't terrible, but then there just was no music to accompany it, and there wasn't anything special. It was a decent sword fight, but when you set up that these swords have this electricity, and then they don't have that when they strike each other, and it's like, oh, well, this is just a sort of standard, sparring match. There's no music. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. And then they also make this whole big deal of, storming the castle and everything. But other than that one shot of, the 5 or 8 people running through, they didn't really do anything else.
Yeah, that was. I mentioned at the time it looked like a very small invading party.
It was just whoever was on set that day. So, and then they also leave this open that Grendel is still alive. I was kind of thinking, like, man, is the Doctor actually going to kill him? That'd be interesting. Or maybe he kills himself or something, but he just jumped into the moat and swam away. And it's like, okay, I guess that's it. I guess they all know that the treason that he has done, so it would be an uphill battle for him to come back.
And, well, I was going to say, maybe they're setting it up for a sequel somewhere down the line.
Maybe, I don't know. That could be interesting. The only thing is, we would normally have, if we did come back to a place, it'd be like almost hundreds of years later, so seeing something where it's like, oh, we bring back the same characters would be interesting. So, I don't know. We'll have to see if they ever do bring that back. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. You got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right.
Next up is The Power of Kroll.
All right, then.
Okay.
I think this should be another 4-parter. Yep.
Yeah, and then what's the last one? The Armageddon something?
The Armageddon Factor.
Okay.
So.
Well,
and that'll
Armageddon out of here.
Yeah. That'll round us out for the season. And on that terrible joke you just did, that's pretty much it for this. Oh, I forgot how I end. With all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around any of those. There's a playlist for all of our Doctor Who classic reactions, as well as another playlist for all of my modern Doctor Who reactions if you want to go check those out. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.